with the court's decision in Terry v. Ohio? Why or why not? Mira?
Well, when it's on paper, it sounds agreeable. I mean, if they've got reasonable suspicion and if they have probable cause, then there's no reason. And if they have solid evidence that a crime is about to occur or is occurring, then it's not completely unreasonable to think that they have the right to just stop them. But and then again, I can't help but think of New York State that how it's not used correctly.
Yeah? Do you have a response?
I think the misuse decision, like you said, like if I think that like you have a bag of marijuana in your bag, like I can just say like I think you have a gun in your bag, like you know it's like it can be misused, but like I think the decision in this case is correct.
Okay, so we have two agreements with the decision. Dave?
I don't agree with the court's decision because they're assuming that a crime is about to occur, but they can't prove that it would have happened or it wouldn't have. They just made a judgment on what they saw, which was two men milling about a store corner, which they can do. That there's nothing wrong with that, and that a third man approached them, which could have just been a meeting between a group of friends who just haven't seen each other for a long time. I think it's unreasonable for the police to be looking for something and see something that might fit that. If he's looking for a crime, he's going to see it.
Interesting. Sarah?
I would disagree with it if the police didn't witness it for a while, but it says that they were chasing by and they were screaming several times. So I mean, it does get suspicious eventually, and you can't just sit there and wait for something to happen. You're not going to wait until they go into the store and point a gun at someone, and then you step in. You can see that something is it's very possible, and I think it really depends on situations. And in this situation, I guess the police officer knows that this is they probably witnessed something like this before, and I don't know, they were right in the situation, but they found the gun. So I agree with the decision.
Okay.
I think from situation to situation, I don't think this should really be that much of a precedent, probably, because it really does vary a lot, and now it's been used for the wrong reasons, very often for drug-related offenses. So I don't think it should necessarily be used as a precedent because every situation is so different in this case, because it's not something that's specifically you see it happen and then you arrest a person. It's you have this sort of feeling that it could possibly be a problem, so I don't think it's...
So that's what Dave was pointing to, right? Where how do you know? How do you describe, if a crime's actually about to occur or not?
It also seems very convenient that they can just pat you down because they think there's going to be a dangerous weapon. That they're just assuming that because you're looking suspicious that you do have a dangerous weapon.
So you think this provides police with too much freedom?
Yeah.
Okay. Should they have to wait for a crime to have occurred? Should we have to wait until someone gets hurt? You say no? Why, Kamalesh?
I just think that it's better to be safe than sorry, and if, pertaining to this case, what if the guy would have gone into the store and, shot the place up, then what would the police officer say, wow, I had a suspicion and I knew, I should have done something, I just think it's better to be safe than sorry than to wait for, something bad to happen.
Well, I believe that this decision gave the police too much power because, one, they could pat you down based on race. They could pat you down because they see, oh, you look like you dress inappropriately, so maybe you might be in a gang, maybe you have a weapon.
What about this part? You brought the idea of they could pat you down for race. You need reasonable and articulable suspicion. Let's talk about that for a second, Michaela.
I think it's just, I don't see the harm in preventing something whether or not it was going to happen, but if you think something could happen, there's not a lot of harm in trying to prevent something. And if you stop something that could happen, for example, holding the illegal weapon concealed in a threatening manner, I feel like there's something that could have gone on there, and I think it's better to prevent something that whether or not could happen or could not have happened.
I just wanted to respond to my neighbor thing. He said it's they're getting too much power. The police, and I actually wrote that in my thing that just if you're just searching someone, but it would be too much power if they were violent against the person, the two people, or if they were just passing by, saw them on a corner, right away got out of the car and went towards them or whatever. But I don't know, based on what you said and what it was just very.
So the actions of the police matter, and how the police conduct the search matter. So this theme that you guys are touching on, how you weigh the individual freedoms with the interest of public safety, is basically what we're going to be talking about all semester with everything that we look at, right? When does the system infringe upon the interests of the individual in order to protect the interests of society? When are we okay with that, and when are we not okay with that? And that's really what we're going to be talking about all semester. Goal of stop and frisk, as we've been saying, is to prevent a crime that has been, is being, or is about to occur. Now, we're going to look at a bunch of charts and graphs and data that really talk about whether this is an effective policy and whether or not we agree with this policy. But we're going to look at it through 3 different lenses. The first is the constitutional question. Does stop and frisk violate the Constitution? Does it violate the 4th Amendment? Who can tell us what the 4th Amendment is? Mira.
Protection from unreasonable search and seizures.
Protection from unreasonable search and seizures. We're going to decide if stop and frisk is a reasonable or unreasonable search. Yeah?
So, I mean, one reason why it's hard for us to talk about it is because we're New York City fans, and New York City stop and frisk. I mean, there's a reason you told us think about 1960s stop and frisk that I want to see. So I was gonna ask, stop and frisk like that we see here, is it like that in other states as well, or?
It depends. You know, Philadelphia has gotten a huge backlash against their use of stop and frisk. They've been accused of abusing it, and a class action lawsuit, I think of 5 men, have come forward against Philadelphia Police Department. It's implemented differently in, rural Kansas or, North Dakota, other places. So it really depends on the context of the area. Basically, what Terry v. Ohio did was allow this practice to be legal.
It doesn't say how it should be implemented.
Exactly. It does not say how it should be implemented, and that's up to the discretion of the police department that desires to implement it. Detroit, for example, we're going to look at some crime rates from Detroit. Detroit has an incredibly high violent crime rate. And Detroit Police Department announced in August that it's going to start implementing stop and frisk policies. And when we look at those crime rates, we're going to decide whether we think that's a good idea or not based on the needs of that area. And the needs of that area are different than the needs of New York City. It's a good question, though. Any other questions?
Do you know if the NYPD has a certain quota for stop and frisk? I think that they have to stop a certain amount of people in a month or something like that?
So, yes and no. Officially, a police department is not allowed to set quotas. They can't say, you need to find a certain number of guns each month, because if those guns don't exist, police are going to start creating stories as if they exist. Now, in practice, police departments have found ways to encourage officers to find certain things or engage in certain activities that may help find certain things, but officially, they're not allowed to. Unofficially, it's up for question.
Yeah, that's kind of like the thing that we watched in that film in Criminal, where they paid officers that had more arrests more. They got like bonuses, and the officers who had 2 arrests, but they arrested murderers, got paid less than the guy who stopped 30 in a month for like petty drug offenses. So
Yes, that's a really good point. I'm glad you made that point. Jonathan, do you have a response?
No, I was actually going to continue.
Okay.
In terms of how it's implemented, how's police protection in the law system? For example, what's going on is stop and frisk is being practiced everywhere. There's not a lot of success with it. But what you do see is that police instigate a person to be stop and frisked so that the person can then fight back. And then all of a sudden the police, like, you get these situations all around, but can the person sue the police back, or are there like protection